Mary Ann Robson was born on the 31st of October 1832 at Lower Moseley, County Durham. When Mary Ann was 8, her parents moved the family to the County Durham village of Merton. Unusually, she was educated, which was unusual for a girl from a mining background at that time. Soon after the move, Mary Ann's father fell 150 feet, 46 metres, to his death down a mine shaft at Merton Colliery in February 1842. Her father's body was delivered to her mother in a sack, bearing the stamp, property of South Hetton Coal Company. As the miner's cottage they inhabited was tied to Michael's job, the widow and children would have to be evicted. In 1843, her mother married George Stott, also a miner. At age 16, Mary Ann decided to leave home to become a nurse at the nearby village of South Hetton, in the home of Edward Potter, a manager at Merton Colliery. After all the children had been sent to boarding school in Darlington over the next 3 years, she returned to her stepfather's home and trained as a dressmaker. In 1852, 20-year-old Mary Ann married a labourer named William Mowbray at Newcastle upon Tyne, Register Office. After raising several children, William then worked as a fireman aboard a steam vessel sailing out of Sunderland. This meant Mary Ann would have to take care of the children all alone. William died of an intestinal disorder in January 1865. The lives of William and of their children were insured by the British and Prudential Insurance Office, and Mary Ann collected a payout of £35 on William's death, which is equivalent to about £3,560 in today's money. This was about half a year's wages for a manual labourer at the time. Soon after Mowbray's death, Mary Ann moved to Seaham Harbour, where she struck up a relationship with Joseph Nattrass. During this time, her 3.5-year-old daughter, the second Margaret Jane, died of typhus fever, leaving her with only one child out of the 9 she had born. She returned to Sunderland and took up employment at the Sunderland Infirmary House of Recovery for the cure of contagious fever, dispensary and humane society. She sent her surviving child, Isabella, to live with her mother. One of her patients at the infirmary was engineer George Ward. They married at St Peter's Church, Monk Wearmouth, on the 28th of August 1865. Ward died on the 20th of October 1866 after a long illness categorised by paralysis and intestinal problems. Once again, Mary Ann collected his insurance money in respect of her husband's death. Following George's death, Mary Ann met James Robinson, a shipwright from Pallion in Sunderland, whose wife Hannah had just recently died. He hired Mary Ann as a housekeeper in November 1866. A month later, when James's baby John died of gastric fever, he turned to his housekeeper for comfort and she became pregnant. Then Mary Ann's mother, living in Seaham Harbour, became ill with hepatitis, so she immediately went to her. Although her mother began to recover, she also began to complain of stomach pains. She died at age 54 in the spring of 1867, 9 days after Mary Ann's arrival. In 1867, Mary Ann's stepfather George Stott married his widowed neighbour Hannah Paley. Mary Ann's daughter Isabella Mowbray was soon brought back to the Robinson household and soon developed severe stomach pains and died, as did 2 of Robinson's children, Elizabeth and James. All 3 children were buried in the last week of April and first week of May 1867. Mary Ann received a life insurance payment of £5 10 shillings for Isabella. Robinson married Mary Ann at St Michael's in Bishop Wearmouth on the 11th of August 1867. Their first child, Margaret Isabella, was born that November, but she became ill and died in February 1868. Their second child, George, was born on the 18th of June 1869. Meanwhile, Robinson had become suspicious of his wife's insistence that he insure his life. He discovered that she had run up debts of £60 behind his back and had stolen more than £50 that she had expected at a bank. He then found out that Mary Ann had been forcing his older children to pawn household valuables. He threw her out, retaining custody of their son George. Mary Ann was desperate and living in the streets until her friend Margaret Cotton introduced her to her brother Frederick, a pitman and recent widower living in Walbottle, Northumberland. He had also just lost 2 of his 4 children. Margaret had acted as a substitute mother for the remaining children, Frederick Jr. and Charles. but in late March 1870 she died from an undetermined stomach ailment, leaving Mary Ann to console the grieving Frederick Sr. Soon her 12th pregnancy was underway. Cotton and Mary Ann were married on the 17th of September 1870 at St Andrews in Newcastle upon Tyne, and their son Robert was born in 1871. Soon after, Mary Ann learnt that her former lover, Joseph Nattrass, was living only 48 kilometres away in County Durham, in the village of West Auckland, and was no longer married. She rekindled the romance and persuaded her new family to move near him. Cotton died in December of that year from gastric fever. Insurance had been affected on his life and those of his sons. Frederick Jr. died in March 1872 and the infant Robert soon after. After Frederick's death, Nattrass soon became Mary Ann's lodger. She gained employment as a nurse to an excise officer recovering from smallpox. Soon, Mary became pregnant by him with her 13th child. Nattrass then became very ill with gastric fever and died just after revising his will in Mary Ann's favour. Mary Ann's downfall came when a parish official, Thomas Riley, asked her to help nurse a woman who was ill with smallpox. She complained that the last surviving cotton boy, Charles Edward, was in the way and asked Riley if he would be committed to the workhouse. Riley, who also served as West Auckland's assistant coroner, said that she needed to accompany him. She told Riley that the boy was sickly and added, "I won't be troubled long, he'll go out like the rest of the Cottons." 5 days later, Mary Ann told Riley that the boy had died. Riley went to the village police and convinced the doctor to delay writing a death certificate until the circumstances could be investigated. Mary Ann's first visit after Charles's death was not to the doctor but the insurance officer. There she discovered that no money would be paid out until a death certificate was issued. An inquest was held and the jury returned a verdict of natural causes. Mary Ann claimed to have used arrowroot to relieve his illness. Then the local newspapers latched on at the story and discovered Mary Ann had moved around northern England and lost 3 husbands, a lover, a friend, her mother, and 11 children, all of whom had died of stomach fevers. Dr. William Byers Kilburn, who had attended Charles, had kept samples and tests, and they showed that they contained arsenic. He told the police, who arrested Mary Ann and procured exhumation of Charles's body. She was charged with his murder until the trial was delayed until after the delivery in Durham Gaol on the 10th of January 1873 of her 13th and final child, whom she named Margaret Edith Quick Manning Cotton. Cotton's trial then began on the 5th of March 1873. The defence in the case was handled by Thomas Campbell Foster, who argued during the trial that Charles had died from inhaling arsenic used as a dye in the green wallpaper of the Cotton home. The doctor testified that there was no other powder on the same shelf in the chemist's shop as the arsenic, only liquid. The chemist himself claimed that there were no other powders. Campbell Foster argued that it was possible that the chemist had mistakenly used arsenic powder instead of bismuth powder when preparing a bottle for Cotton, because he had been distracted talking to other people. The jury retired for 90 minutes before returning a guilty verdict. The Times correspondent reported on the 20th of March, quote, "After conviction, the wretched woman exhibited strong emotion, but this gave place in a few hours to her habitual cold, reserved demeanour, and while she harbours a strong conviction that the royal clemency will be extended towards her, she staunchly asserts her innocence of the crime that she is being convicted of." Several petitions were presented to the Home Secretary, but to no avail. Mary Ann Cotton was hanged at Durham County Gaol on the 24th of March 1873 by William Calcraft. She died not from her neck breaking, but the strangulation caused by the rope being rigged too short, which people theorise was deliberately. Of Mary Ann's 13 children, only 2 survived her, Margaret Edith and her son George, to her marriage to James Robinson. Comment below what North East True Crime story you'd like to hear next, and make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell to get alerts to all brand new uploads.